Charles Ivars Kalme, a Latvian-American chess master, a mathematician. Born in Riga, Latvia, a lot of great players were, notably Mikhail Tal. Kalme was born on November 15th, 1939, but at the conclusion of World War II, Kalme and what was left of his family fled Latvia. He lived for years in a refugee camp in Germany, but finally arrived in Philadelphia in 1951 and lived here for quite a while. He won the U.S. Junior Chess Championship in Lincoln, Nebraska in 1955 with a score of 9-1. He won the Pan American Collegiate Championship in 1957, mentioning for the third time that he played on the U.S. team in the World Student Team Chess Championship in Leningrad earlier in the year. It was the summer of 1960, July and August. And the USA won it. It's the only time the USA ever won it, was that year. And their top three boards, Lombardi, Kalme was second board, and Weinstein all won individual golds on their boards, first, second, and third boards, and they won, obviously, the team gold. Kalme had 11 wins, 1 loss, and 1 draw. Now, he was a PhD in mathematics, that degree conferred in 1967. He was professor of mathematics at the University of California, Berkeley. But when Latvia regained its freedom from the Soviet Union, he returned to his native land. He died there March 20th, 2002. E4 from Fischer, E5, Knight F3, Knight C6, Bishop B5. The Ruy Lopez, also known as the Spanish game, but Ruy Lopez, I haven't given this information out in a long time. Since it's so frequently played, I don't reiterate the background on all of these players, but I will tell you today. Ruy Lopez, Rodrigo Lopez de Segura, lived in the 1500s, 1530 to 1580 roughly. Spanish chess player and author. He was a Catholic priest, and he wrote a book on chess in 1561, which was one of the first books written about modern chess in Europe. And Ruy Lopez was the strongest Spanish player for a good 20 years. Speaking of strong players, A6 is Morphy's defense, named for Paul Morphy, and he lived from June 22nd, 1837 to July 10th, 1884. His chess career was brief, but he was acknowledged as the world's greatest player in the 1850s. Another player who was among the world's greatest back then, namely Adolf Anderssen, said that Morphy was the best player ever to play the game. Bobby Fischer once said that Morphy was the best player ever. Morphy was so good at chess that he would often deliberately play bad moves. Just for instance, Columbus variation, which Valerie says was named actually after Christopher Columbus, but I could not find a single piece of corroborating evidence that would support that. Valerie, if you're still listening, put that link in there and tell us where you found that piece of information, because I couldn't find it. Knight F6, kingside castles, Bishop E7, the closed Spanish. Rook E1, Pawn B5, Bishop B3, kingside castles, Pawn C3, Pawn D6, Pawn H3. Kedis's variation. That's named for Paul Kedis. Paul Kedis lived from January 7th, 1916 to June 5th, 1975, an Estonian grandmaster. He was among the world's top players from the mid-1930s to the mid-1960s, and he had 5 near misses at World Championship chances. Well, Estonia was repeatedly invaded and occupied in World War II, and as a consequence, Kedis was forced to represent the Soviet Union from 40 and 41, and then 44 all the way to 75, or he had to represent Nazi Germany from 41 to 44. Anyway, Palkeres won the Avro 1938 tournament, and that win led to negotiations for a title match against Alexander Alekhine, but the match never took place because of the outbreak of World War II. Then Palkeres was runner-up 4 consecutive times in candidates tournaments. So 4 near misses, and that was between 1953 and 1962. And as a result of those 4 close calls, as well as other strong results, Geddes is in that list of super grandmasters among the greatest not to have won the World Championship. He is widely regarded as a national hero in Estonia, but he was nicknamed Paul II because of those runner-up finishes. But I'll tell you how well known he is. When I was in Racine, Wisconsin, me and John Dingman were sitting at a table in Reflections. Reflections was a restaurant there. Trying to remember where it was. It's on the south side of Racine. Anyway, we got this waitress who had a European accent, and I said, "Where's that accent from?" And she said, "Estonia." I said, "Oh, Palkeres." And she said, her eyes widened up and she got all excited. That's how well known Palkeres is. She seemed surprised that I knew who he was. Like, come on, lady. Are you kidding me? Who doesn't know who Palkeres is? Anyway, H3, Geddes' variation. So knight d7 here, and a4 by Fischer, not the book move. Of course, the threat is to take, because that discovers a pin on that pawn. But the book move, you probably know. It's not that Bobby's never played d4 here before. But if you check volume C, section 92, you'll find that d4 is the book move, followed by bishop f6, then pawn a4, bishop b7, knight a3, pawn takes pawn on d4, and pawn takes pawn. And the most common move after that is rook e8. Bobby playing a4 right away. Knight c5. That gets a star, but I thought develop your bishop to b7. I get a thumbs up for that move. Bishop d5, pinning the knight to the rook. You don't want to play the pawn takes now, by the way. So you don't want to give up your bishop here. Obviously, he's not going to take this. I can't tell you how many beginners would play this. And when I ask them why they play it, how many beginners would say, well, because if he takes the pawn, I'll win his rook. Okay, but what if he doesn't take the pawn? What if he takes your bishop? So don't play pawn takes pawn there. And after bishop e6, now the rook's defended. Now you got to move your queen. Now it is safe to take the pawn. And okay, you're not losing, but you got all these pieces on the back rank except for one coming back. For that reason, bishop to d5. Bishop b7 breaks the pin. Now pawn takes pawn and pawn takes pawn. Eval bar very slightly favoring white here. Rook takes rook now. Queen takes rook. d4 here. Knight d7. Knight a3. Pawn b4. Knight c4. And e takes d4. That's marked as a mistake with bishop f6 being called for, with the idea of capturing here, no doubt. So if I bishop e3, pawn takes pawn, and you've got some pressure down here. Kalme with e takes d4, c takes d4, now knight f6. That's marked inaccurate. The bot calling for knight d8, yeah. The idea of knight d8 is to vacate c6 for this pawn to trap this bishop. And therefore, he's forced to trade. If this is played, the bishop has no safe where to go. So you'd have to take. And d5, I think, to blunt that diagonal. I don't think you can get away with bishop f4 here. It gets a check mark, actually. I guess I could play knight e6 here, though. And then we take, and retract our bishop here. You may wonder, well, can't I now just go ahead and trap the bishop? Oh, yeah, that's right. I can trap the bishop. Just trap the bishop. But this bishop is now trapped. I get a reciprocal trap. Well, if he plays here, we got e5, and his bishop is trapped. Interesting line, isn't it? Very interesting line. Pretty complex position. Anyway, knight f6 was tried, marked inaccurate. Bishop g5, queen d8, king h8 had been called for. I thought you could maybe get some activity on the a file. I get a check mark. This was my idea. Of course, the queen is kind of tethered to this bishop, so you'd have to... I was thinking maybe come over here, but I'm not liking that idea after all. Queen d8, bot calling for king h8. Queen a4, super attacking the knight. Bishop takes knight is better. Bishop takes knight, bishop takes bishop, queen d3 maybe. Inaccurate. Queen a4 was played, super attacking the knight. Queen a8, battery defending the knight. Queen takes queen, marked as a mistake from Fischer. The bot says keep those queens on the board. Retreat back to d1. Queen takes queen was played. Rook takes queen. Yeah, I guess the point is, you've heard me say it 1,000 times. Do not make a trade that helps your opponent invade. Don't do it. Don't do it. Speaking of songs from my past, don't go to bed with no price on your head. Yeah, don't do it. Don't do the crime if you can't do the time. Oh, don't do it. And keep your eye on the sparrow. Don't do it. When the going gets narrow. What was that from? Beretta, right? Robert Blake. Don't make a trade that helps your opponent invade. Bishop takes knight. Knight e3 definitely feels hotter with eyes on knight f5. If h6, we'll go ahead with knight f5. Marked wrong. I was kind of just showing why I don't care about... Oh, yeah, baby. And my point is, again, if pawn takes, we remove the defender, and then we're going to pick this guy up with a fork. And we are winning. So he would have to defend. He wouldn't be able to take this. He'd have to play king f8. And then after takes, etc., etc. Going back, Bobby went ahead and took the knight straight away here and plays e5 anyway. Pawn takes the pawn. King's knight takes the pawn. Says take it with the pawn, the bot says. You do not want to take it with the other knight. We'll show that in a moment, but let's talk about this pawn capturing. That's obviously just going to be answered by the bishop back to e7. And if I play here, you can't take that. Well, you can take it, but it's ill-advised because do not make a trade that helps your opponent invade. So you're best to play here. Okay, it says knight a5, but knight a5 resolves this. Yeah, okay. But do not take it here. And then you're setting the stage for a discovered attack, even though it says to take this first. Because then you get a fork. Yeah. Oh, no, you can interpose. Right, and don't take this, take this. Yeah, and this is why it's equal. Yeah, that's going to peter out to a draw. Back. Do not take the pawn with this knight. Inaccurate. Now on knight takes knight, bishop has to take the bishop here, but he's got tempo. Check. And he just moves his rook to safety. Get behind this pawn. So, king's knight takes the pawn. You say, doesn't he take anyway? Yes, he does. But the difference is you don't have a knight sitting here that can be captured. So after bishop takes bishop, there's no longer the tempo gaining move. So he tries knight d3 instead, hitting the rook. Well, Bobby says, I'm more than happy to trade off and play for the draw. I've got 2 wins in my pocket already. I don't mind a few easy draws to save some energy, especially if one of them comes from one of the strongest players, Charles Kalme. Bishop back to e4, envelops the knight. Knight is almost trapped. So b3 has to be played to cover this square to give the knight somewhere to go. So don't be grabbing pawns here and getting your knight trapped. That would be a blunder. Captain Blunderpants. So he plays b3 to provide his knight a safe haven on c2. Bobby played knight d2, offered the draw. You've got opposite colored bishops. The draw was accepted, and he went home early and got some rest.